The morning air in downtown Chicago carried the sharp bite of early November, and the city moved in its usual relentless rhythm, suits and briefcases, honking horns, the smell of fresh coffee drifting from every corner cafe. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small moments to change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories. Also, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Inside the Grand Marble Grocery, one of the most upscale stores in the city, the kind of place where a single bottle of olive oil costs $40 and the floors shine like mirrors. People moved quietly and carefully, aware of the unspoken rules that wealth writes in every corner of such spaces. Nobody laughed too loud. Nobody moved too fast. Everyone belonged, or at least they dressed like they did. It was here, in this gleaming temple of privilege, that something extraordinary was about to happen. Something so raw and so pure that it would make groan men weep and force an entire city to rethink what it truly means to be rich. Arthur Calloway was not a man who stood in lines. He was 63 years old, silver-haired, sharp-jawed, and worth approximately $4.2 billion. According to the last Forbes estimate. He owned 3 companies, 2 private jets, a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, and a reputation for being untouchable. He had walked into the Grand Marble Grocery that Tuesday morning without his usual assistant, without his usual entourage, just himself in a charcoal overcoat, picking up a few items his doctor had recently insisted upon: walnuts, green tea, a particular brand of whole grain bread. It was almost amusing, he had thought to himself. A billionaire grocery shopping alone like a regular person. He had placed his items on the gleaming checkout counter, exchanged a brief and distant nod with the cashier. A young man named Derek, who had worked there for 2 years, and recognized Arthur immediately, but said nothing, because that was also an unspoken rule of such places. Arthur reached into the inside pocket of his overcoat and produced his black card, the kind with no limit, the kind that had never once failed him in 40 years of using it. Derek swiped it once. The machine beeped, a short, sharp, rejecting beep. Derek's face changed almost imperceptibly. He swiped it again. The same beep. A small line had formed behind Arthur. 4, maybe 5 people. And the silence that followed that second beep was the loudest silence Arthur Calloway had ever heard in his life. He reached for his phone to call his bank, but realized with a cold jolt that he had left it in his car, something he never did. Something so unlike him that it almost felt like the universe was scripting this moment deliberately. He patted his coat pockets. No cash, no backup card, nothing. For the first time in perhaps decades, Arthur Calloway felt something unfamiliar crawl up his spine. Vulnerability. Derek cleared his throat softly and suggested, without any cruelty, just plain practicality, that perhaps Mr. Calloway could step aside and call his bank, that he was happy to hold the items. The people behind Arthur shifted, some looking away politely, some failing to hide the small, involuntary flicker of satisfaction that human beings sometimes feel when the mighty stumble, not out of hatred, just out of the strange comfort it provides to know that no one is entirely untouchable. It was at this precise moment that a small voice came from somewhere, near the back of the line, soft, clear and completely unafraid. "I can pay for it." Everyone turned. Standing near the end of the line was a little girl, no older than 8, with wide brown eyes, 2 uneven braids, a winter coat that was slightly too large for her small frame, and shoes that had clearly walked many miles. She was holding a small red change purse in both hands. The kind children are given as gifts, decorated with white stars that had mostly worn off. Her name was Maya. She had come to the store with her grandmother, who was waiting outside on the bench near the entrance because her knees hurt too much to stand. Maya had been sent in with exact change to buy one, small carton of milk and a packet of crackers, the kind of errand that meant something in her household, where every dollar was discussed, every purchase was deliberate, and nothing was ever wasted. She had already paid for her milk and crackers, and what remained in that little red purse was $6.70, every penny of it money she had earned herself over 3 weeks. by helping her elderly neighbor carry groceries up 2 flights of stairs every Saturday morning. It was her savings. It was everything she had, and she was holding it out toward a man in a coat that cost more than her grandmother's monthly rent. Without hesitation, without performance, without any awareness that what she was doing was extraordinary. Arthur stared at her. The cashier stared at her. The entire line stared at her. Maya looked directly at Arthur and said, in that same calm, matter-of-fact voice, "You can have it. I don't mind." Arthur Calloway, who had negotiated billion-dollar mergers without blinking, who had buried his parents and his first business partner and had not cried at any funeral, felt something crack open in his chest so suddenly and so completely that he had to grip the edge of the counter. He crouched down to her level. This giant of industry and finance, this man whose name was on buildings, and he looked at this small girl with her worn shoes and her red star purse, and he said, very quietly, "Why would you do that for me? You don't even know me." Maya shrugged the way children shrug when adults ask questions with obvious answers. "Because you needed help," she said simply. "That's why." Arthur's assistant arrived 11 minutes later with his phone and backup cards, having realized the mistake and driven across the city in a panic. The groceries were paid for, the line moved on, the store returned to its quiet hum. But Arthur did not leave. He sat with Maya on the bench outside, next to her grandmother, and he listened, and really listened, perhaps for the first time in years, to the story of their lives, their neighborhood, the school that needed new books, the heating that sometimes didn't work in winter. 2 weeks later, Maya's school received a full renovation funded anonymously. Her neighborhood got a new community center. Her grandmother's medical bills disappeared quietly, and every single Saturday for the next 2 years, until he had to travel for health reasons, Arthur Calloway personally carried groceries up 2 flights of stairs for an elderly woman on the south side of Chicago, because a little girl with $6.70 had taught him something that 40 years and $4 billion never had. She had taught him that the most powerful thing a human being can do is simply, without calculation and without reward, turn to someone who is struggling and say, "I see you and I will help." If this story touched your heart, please show your love by giving a like, sharing it with someone who needs to believe in kindness today, and subscribing to our channel Kindness True Stories, where every story reminds us that humanity's greatest wealth has nothing to do with money.